Hi, Roland. This is Dave Janis here in Hilo, Hawaii. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work I've been doing with the U.S. Forest Service, trying to restore Hawaii's tropical dry forests. It's one of the most endangered and unique ecosystems on the planet. I'm going to apologize ahead of time, too, for any traffic noise that might go by. It's very noisy here on the weekends, and I've had like 15 takes already, and it's just not working out. So, all right. Well, as you may know, Hawaii has some of the most unique flora on the planet. It's a result of being out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. 90% of the plant species here are endemic, which means they're found nowhere else. It's the highest rate on the planet, even more so than the Galapagos Islands, which Charles Darwin made so famous. Uh, so here we are. Here's Hawaii Island. It's the newest and southeastmost of the Hawaiian island chain, which is all of these islands. The northwest islands here tend to be very small, but they are very, very collectively significant, but not for our purposes. So right there, blown up on this map, is Pohakuloa Training Area, where I do most of the work. Also down here is a protected area called Pu'uwawa, and we do some of the work. We have a few plots out there as well, but it's basically a continuation of the same system just down the hill. PTA, as we call it, is a military training facility. The Army uses it to practice artillery fire and bombing and shooting and all the stuff that the Army does. And so as a result, the land there is pretty degraded. There are crater marks and unexploded ordnance all over the place that we have to watch out for. And, well, of course, one of the biggest problems is that they're constantly setting fires out there, despite all of the endangered species out there. It's a very dry system between the two main volcanoes here, Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa. You'll see some pictures of it a little bit later. So up here is the list of the rare species, the rare plant species found in PTA. There are 11 endangered. The rest are rare. The S's here are species of concern. The ones here threatened. This is a key for the different threats that they face, such as fire and. Hold on. Sorry, that was a whole gang of motorcyclists turning around in front of the house. Okay, and at Pu'uwawa, there are also there are even more. There's 22 federally listed species, 17 of which have been completely extirpated, although they do exist very rarely elsewhere on the island. So our project is part of the Department of Defense's ESTCP program, which is the Environmental Security Technology Certification Program. And it's a series of grants that they give out to have people test out, new experimental technologies and computer programs and things like that, before the military would go through this whole expense of implementing the program, and then to find out that it doesn't work. So this is sort of like the testing phase. Now, my research group under Susan Cordell has been doing this research for quite a number of years, and they've taken LiDAR images of the entire base and the Pu'uwawa land area. Now, the LiDAR uses a laser to map the land, and it's very, very detailed. Now, it can pick out individual trees, and some people are doing work where they're actually able to identify tree species by LiDAR. What we're doing is identifying land characteristics. So our three categories are the slope of the land, the aspect, which way it faces relative to the sun, and the wind. Which the prevailing winds always come from the east here. That's the direction of the trade winds. And so if it's on the lee of the hill, it's going to have less wind stress as opposed to being on the windward side. This is very important for all of these, these very rare plants because they're under so many other stresses that when you factor in these abiotic stresses, they just can't make it. So down at the bottom here is a picture of PTA. This is all Pohakuloa. The green circles here are where most of the rare plants are, and the red square is where that's the impact zone. That's where all the shelling is, and nobody can go there. Okay, sorry about that. So as I was saying, we used the lidar on this land to pinpoint the areas that would be most amenable to rare plants surviving. And part of the reason for this study was because the Center for Environmental Management of Military Lands, CEMEL, has done hundreds and thousands of outplants up in PTA, and most of the plants don't survive. And my pal Susan has done similar outplanting experiments, and the plants just can't make it. It's too tough up there. It's windy, it's dry, it's sunny, high elevation. It's really difficult. So we're hoping that this program will help us target the best places on the landscape to put in outplantings and have them actually survive and thrive and begin to spread outwards. So that these restoration costs can be kept to a minimum. And here we have, a couple examples of what the different categories look like. This top picture here would be probably, a zone 0 or zone 1. No, this would definitely be a zone 0. It's wide open. It's getting blasted by the sun. There's no slope. It's not protected from the wind in any way. And this is actually a pretty typical view up at PTA. That's just these large swaths of invasive grass, often, as a result of prior fires. You can see some native trees there in the background. It used to be a closed canopy forest between the invasive animals and the fires. It's just not that way anymore. And because the trees are disappearing, it's becoming tougher for the remaining trees because they're no longer able to generate moisture through evapotranspiration, and they're not able to pick up the moisture as these clouds roll through. They don't really drop rain, but the leaves on these trees are designed to catch moisture, drop it into the soil, and that's how they get their water. But that doesn't happen anymore. Over here, this would be probably like a zone 2, maybe a zone 3 down at the base here, but the tops of ridges are pretty tough, so this would be a 0 right at the very top, and then we come down to a 1, 2, and then probably 3 down here. This is actually a little stand-up Akoko. It's Kamasice oluwaluana. It's a type of euphorbia. Really pretty tree. It's not federally listed, but it probably should be. It's disappearing rapidly, and this particular picture is one of the only spots where they're naturally regenerating. And I haven't compared it to our habitat suitability map, but I would suspect down here where the seedlings are regenerating is probably its own. Here's another picture, kind of looking out across PTA from the upper reaches on Mauna Kea. Down in here would be a zone 3, and I'm not exactly sure. These might be a little too steep to be a zone 3. It might be a zone 2. But unlike the second picture here, this one has not been fenced, and so the animals have devastated everything in there. This one is fenced off, so you don't get the brown. So my part of the project here, which I turned into my internship, was to use my horticultural background. Prior to coming to grad school, I was in horticulture for many years. And so, I wanted to kind of piece together the information about these species because on our endangered species permit, we're only allowed to take so many seeds. We're only allowed 800 seeds of each species. And a lot of these are very inbred. They have unhealthy populations, from drought and whatnot. And so even of those 800 species, we're not likely to have a high germination rate. So we really wanted to maximize the number of plants we were going to get out of this. So we talked to these people. Kathy Kawakami has by far the most experience with the plants from PTA. We spoke with her. She doesn't work with a lot of the ones that we're working with, however, so we are going to have to figure out some of the things on our own. Brian Kiabu has worked with some of these. He was actually Don Goo's intern for a while, and they pioneered a lot of this work back in the 70s and 80s, even into the early 90s, I believe. They were some of the first people to work with a lot of these species, and just, they established a lot of baseline data on what works and what doesn't. Jill Wagner is the manager of the the seed bank here in Hawaii. So she was a wealth of information on seed storage and how to get them to germinate after they've been dried out. And Susan Dale helped us out with a couple tricky species. She does a lot of propagation for the Volcano National Park. And Dave Fawcett is more of a hobbyist at this point than anything, but he was a wealth of information on where to find plants and how to best collect them and everything. And he's very, very helpful. And now I'm just going to talk a bit about some of the species we saw and like some of the challenges that they face. Oh, actually, I have a little video here too. This is just to demonstrate. You can see the evidence of fire, like here in the background. There's almost no plants around this endangered tree here, and it's a pretty tough environment to survive, and it's obviously not doing well. But hold on one minute. So you can see how bad the feral animal problem is here. And it's a very thorny problem because many of the locals want to keep them around because they like to hunt them, but it's completely incompatible with saving all of these native plants that evolved here and live nowhere else. This is a culturally significant tree here, the Kawila. Up in Pu'uwawa is one of the only places where there's an actual stand of them left. And this is what the stand looks like. Here's a dead one here, a dead one here. There's a dead one back here. This is not one. This is one here. This one's not quite dead yet, but this is about as healthy as they get. It's so difficult to I don't know. I just can't let this happen. Like this is why I'm in this field. Like I want to save these things. This here's the Halapepe. This is another. Sorry about the motorcycle. Okay, so here's another super rare tree, the Aiea. There's about 50 individuals of these left, and the state is actually going to build a road over the oldest, healthiest one. This is another target species for us. It's really important to get these things back out there, or they will be gone forever. This is the Halapepe I mentioned before, Pleomele hawaiiensis. It's a really interesting tree, and it had some really healthy populations at Pu'uwawa. And while we were out doing our collecting seeds for our project and taking some of these photographs, these are all my photographs, by the way. I actually happened to be the one who noticed the growth tips on these plants were dying back. We asked about it, inquired, and apparently this is a new invasion that we were the first to discover. And it's threatening all of the remaining plants. If they're not able to bounce back or fight this off, then that's it for them. And then some of these plants are not quite so threatened. I think I'm almost running out of time here. It says I have 15 minutes. I'm at 13:38, so I'm going to just speed through. This plant here, Stenogene angustifolia, is a kind of a ground creeping mint, and it's extremely endangered. There's only a few wild populations out there, but I'm convinced it's only because of the goats and the sheep and other animals that eat them. It's kind of weedy in the greenhouse. We have it popping up everywhere, and it grows like crazy. The Silenes and another one called Spermolepis, the same thing. They're extremely prolific in the greenhouse. They grow fast and well, and they just are not found out in the wild because of all the animals and the drought and the fire. And so hopefully, the result of this project will be positive. Finding these perfect areas for growth is going to let these things establish themselves, reestablish themselves, and begin to spread outwards. And I think that's about all the time I have. Well, aloha.